Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Kris, History of Grim Reaper and the Deities of Death Around the World. I already did part 1, this is part 2, and I'm getting tired, but I'm going to push through it. Video.
Are also no stranger when it comes to the physical representation of death. Mexican folklore has Santa Muerte, which is shortened for Our Lady of Holy Death. Over the last 100 years or so, she has become a far more prominent figure, with her own rapidly growing cult and religious movement. A female skeletal figure dressed in a long robe and carrying a scythe. Her attire in general is much more colourful than the Grim Reaper, and I guess that comes down to her being more of a celebratory figure. If we travel down to the likes of Brazil, Argentina, Colombia and Paraguay, we have San La Muerte, otherwise known as Saint Death. Another skeletal figure carrying a scythe, but this time it's a male figure. Both of these figures have caused some friction with the Catholic Church, which views them as pagan spirits, and thus they should not be mixed in with Christian belief. San La Muerte, despite being frowned upon, is still considered a saint by Catholics in the South American countries. The same can't be said for Our Lady of Death in Mexico, whose belief essentially branched off and became its own cult and religion, with many estimating anywhere between 10 to 20 million devoted followers.
Wow.
In some areas of Mexico and Guatemala, they tell stories of San Pascualito, the king of the graveyard. At this point in time, it should come as no surprise when I tell you this king was a skeleton in robes wearing a crown. A spirit we have spoken about in the past is Baron Samedi, who appears in Haitian voodoo and is associated with death and fertility. The spirits in Haitian voodoo are referred to as Loa, and these spirits are divided into families. The Gede family are the spirits that embody the powers of death and fertility. The head of this family was Baron Samedi, who goes by many names, including Baron La Croix and Baron Cimetière, the cross and the cemetery. Baron Samedi has an extremely distinct appearance. Sometimes he is a skeleton and his face is painted to resemble a skull. His top hat, black tailcoat and fancy cane paint a fairly dapper image, someone attending a party of sorts. And to an extent, this is true. His appearance was meant to resemble a body that had been prepared and dressed for a Haitian-style burial, a time of mourning but also celebration. The celebration and party atmosphere is greatly reflected in Baron Samedi's personality and behaviour. He is about as far from a solemn deity of death as one could be. Never turning down a chance to party, Baron Samedi is never too far away from a glass of rum and a cigar. The incessive smoking and drinking is paired with his lust for mortal women and drug use, just to complete the full house of debauchery. Despite this rowdy behaviour, Baron Samedi still performed all of his duties, greeting the souls of the dead and leading them to the underworld. When someone dies, Baron Samedi digs their grave and greets them. If the Baron refuses to dig a grave, then that person cannot die. Even those who have been afflicted by the worst type of hex, or those who have suffered horrendous injuries, may be able to cheat death if the Baron has taken a liking to them. This extends to him even being able to cure mortals of any wound or disease. So not only can he take life, but he can also restore it.
Yeah.
Baron Samedi was married to Madame Brigitte, who is just as flamboyant and eccentric as her husband. She also has a taste for rum, but chooses to drink hers infused with chili peppers. Maman Brigitte protects tombs, gravestones, cemeteries, and any other place where the dead may reside. Over the years, she has been heavily linked to the Irish deity Brigid or Brigid, a member of the Tuatha De Danann who also has healing powers. This connection is why you may sometimes see her depicted as a pale woman with red hair. As Haitian voodoo is an amalgamation of African Vodun and various European influences, Maman Brigitte was also seen as representing and often depicted as several saints, including the Irish Brigid of Kildare, Mary Magdalene, and Saint Brigid. This gives us two very different depictions that contradict each other. The outspoken, crude, and flamboyant individual, who is often portrayed in a sexualized manner similar to Baron Samedi, but then you also have her shown as a saint. Given what there is written about her behavior, but also her commitment to her duties, one would imagine the truth is somewhere in between. The Baron and his wife had an adopted son called Gede Nebo, a handsome young man who suffered a violent and tragic death. The Baron and his wife adopted him, and in joining their family, he became the patron saint for those who died too early. He shares many of the traits and behaviors of his adopted parents, but is easily recognized by the bottle of white rum that he carries that has been infused with medicinal herbs. Gede Nebo was considered a great healer, as well as the voice for spirits that had yet to be reclaimed for passage to the afterlife, or the lower world in Haitian voodoo. In Japan,
The last one was really cool. He can give life and take it, or heal. That was interesting.
there is the Izanagi and Izanami, the brother and sister deities associated with creation but also death. The first gods created these two divine beings and charged them with creating the very first landmass. The connection to death comes when Izanami died, and Izanagi began his journey to Yomi, or the underworld, to find his wife. When Izanagi found his wife, she was hidden by the shadows. He pleaded for her to return, but this wasn't possible as she had eaten the food of the underworld, and so her place amongst the dead had already been decided. Izanami would still try and ask for permission to leave in the morning. While she slept, Izanagi, using his comb as a torch, was finally able to glance upon his wife, and what he saw petrified him. The once beautiful Izanami was covered in maggots, her body ravaged and her flesh rotting. So given that Izanagi had travelled all the way to the underworld to find his lost wife, he then did the honourable thing. He ran for his life as fast as he could, abandoning his no longer attractive wife and sealing the entrance to the underworld shut with a very, very large boulder. Izanami gave chase, sending the spirits of the dead to find her husband. However, with the entrance sealed, the land of the living was now separated from the land of the dead, hence the separation between Izanagi, life, and Izanami, death. The once goddess of creation screamed for her husband to return, otherwise threatening to destroy 1,000 souls of the living a day. Izanagi responded by saying he would then give life to 1,500 souls every day. Enma is the figure who rules over hell and appears in various mythologies across Southeast Asia. His name changes depending on the form of Buddhism we are discussing, and in Japanese Buddhism, the name is Enma. He rules over the kings of hell and decides whether one's sins were enough to condemn them to eternal punishment. This is a figure we can cover in some more detail when we head over to China. The Shinigami are spirits I'm sure some people may be familiar with. Shinigami translates to mean death god or reaper in English. These spirits beckon and call out to humans, bringing them closer to their demise. At times, Izanami has been compared and categorized as a class of Shinigami. Stories from the Edo period discuss these deities of death and their ability to possess humans. Some of these spirits are described as having bad intent, and some state that the Shinigami chooses a person based on the person's intent. These acts and feelings exist inside of the person, and so the possession merely removes the barriers that stop them from acting them out.
So they look for people that could be evil, and they take control of them. Or not take control, but they allow them to be evil. Kind of doing their bidding for them.
Whether it's committing suicide, murder, or other heinous crimes, it's clear the Shinigami provided some with a reason or an explanation as to why these acts occur. To some, it may have even been an excuse. China in general has an insane amount of deities, so covering all of them would be, well, insanity. But seeing as we already discussed Enma, we can take a look at his Chinese counterpart, Yama, or in this case King Yan. Going by dozens of names, King Yan ruled over the realm of the dead in Chinese mythology. Here hell is divided up and ruled over by 10 different kings. Overseeing these kings we have King Yan. These kings are in charge of what is normally referred to as the 8 or 10 courts of hell. Spirits passing through these courts are judged by Yan based on the actions whilst alive. Once he had decided their fate, they continue travelling through hell until they reach the part of hell that serves as punishment for their crime. King Yan often appears as an angry, red-faced, bearded man towering above all of those around him. Guarding the underworld, we have the very strange duo of Oxhead and Horseface. Their names don't leave much to the imagination.
No.
2 men, one with an ox head and the other a horse face. That doesn't
I wonder how they came up with the names. So crazy. Creative.
make it any less of a terrifying experience, given they are the first 2 one encounters when entering the underworld. These 2 absolute mad lads had 3 main roles: to stop souls from trying to escape the underworld, to capture and escort new souls to the underworld to stand before the courts of hell. Lastly, they acted as messengers to the kings of hell. One story they do appear in, which is definitely on my list of future projects, is Journey to the West. The last of these 3 Chinese legends I've chosen to cover today is Meng Po, the goddess of forgetfulness. Meng Po resides in the court of hell where souls go when
Goddess of what? I've already forgot.
they are ready to be reincarnated. Once they arrive and cross the bridge of forgetfulness, Meng Po serves them the 5-flavoured tea of forgetfulness, which essentially wipes all of their memories and allows them to reincarnate into their new life without any fear or burdens from the previous one. This is also seen as purging the soul of any previous sin, allowing for a clean slate and the cycle to start over. Meng Po's story is one of grief and sadness. When her husband died, she took all of this pain into the afterlife, and found herself unable to reincarnate because she could never let go, and so she decided to relieve the pain of the other spirits in the underworld, allowing them to do what she could never and start over. There are some stories of individuals who refused to drink the tea, and when they began their new lives, memories flooded back to them, and so you have strange events such as newborn children speaking fluently because they remembered how. Meng Po assumes the form of an elderly woman, with Old Lady Meng being just one of the many names she went by. Egyptian mythology, like many others, has several deities and spirits of death. Anubis is a
Oh, what the
deity
hell?
who played a very important role throughout someone's entire journey into the afterlife. This included the mummification and embalming process, the protection of graves and cemeteries, and the guiding of souls to the underworld. When a soul is ready to pass the threshold of the living to the afterlife, they are guided by Anubis, where one's heart is then weighed against a feather to see if you are worthy of entering the underworld. This process is also carried out by Anubis. Another deity that takes part in this process is Amit, the devourer of the dead. Some of you may also know Amit as that very weird looking thing from Moon Knight. Amit was made up of the three animals the Egyptians feared most: the head of a crocodile, the front legs and upper body of a lion, and the lower body of a hippopotamus. A fairly strange combination, but given all three animals were man-eaters, and Amit's primary job was eating those unworthy of the afterlife, it does start to make sense.
Okay.
If one's heart weighed the same or less than the feather, your soul was deemed as pure, and you were able to continue your journey to Osiris and the immortality of the underworld. For those whose heart weighed more than
How did they deem your heart was pure? Like, what if you went to war and you killed people? Would you be okay with that? Because you did it in the name of your country? Yeah, I'm curious how they judge what's pure and what's not.
the feather, their journey to the underworld ended here. They were devoured by Amit, where they would never rest and be forced to stand in a lake of fire. This was often equated to dying a second time and being denied the peace that comes with the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians were terrified of Amit, and
Standing in a fiery pit, a fiery lake. But that's not pleasant.
not just because of her appearance, because of everything she represented. Osiris was a god of agriculture and fertility, but this soon changed to include the dead, resurrection, and the afterlife. After a feud with his brother Set, Osiris was killed and chopped into 14 pieces, scattered around Egypt. Eventually, these pieces would be found and buried together, giving Osiris a second chance, resurrected as the judge and king of the underworld. As we've seen today, the vast majority of spirits or deities associated with death are not necessarily evil. Death is a very common fear, and every culture creates its own stories as a way to explain and essentially deal with the idea that death is something we must all face eventually.
That was interesting. I was hoping for a little more of a spooky thing, but, you know, I didn't really know what to expect. Interesting, though. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end this here. And you should like and subscribe. Or next time it's raining and you go and get an umbrella, somehow you're going to open that umbrella and it's going to get caught in your genitals and it's going to just rip it off. I don't know how, but one of the deities in here, I think, was in charge of genital ripping offing from umbrella-age. I'm tired. I'm a tired boy. So, have a good day, have a good night.